stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a silent prayer. And Alderman Cavallo is over Friday underwent some back surgery, so she won't be at the meeting tonight, but if you could just keep her and her speedy recovery in your prayers this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alderman Rinelli.
Here.
Alderwoman Cavallo. Alderwoman Cotto.
Here.
Alderman Carlo.
Here.
Alderman Dorso. Alderman Giacomi.
Here.
Alderman Hadley.
Here.
Alderman Kula.
Here.
Alderman Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Matthews.
Here.
Alderwoman Martinez McCarthy.
Here.
Alderman Napoli.
Here.
Alderman Nugent.
Present.
Alderman Sherman.
Here.
Alderman Pernaruski.
Here.
13 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. And again, just for the record, Alderman Cavallo had surgeries at the end of last week, and Alderman Dorso is out of the country at a wedding because apparently no one gets married in the United States anymore, so he'll hopefully be back soon. With that, we do have 2 presentations this evening. One's on the agenda as the Palace Theater, but we also have, I had passed out last week the report with respect to the pollution control facility, and so they are here tonight, Corporation Counsel Linda Wibby and Chuck Pagano, to talk about that report and what they found. So we'll start with them, and then we'll go to the Palace as long as there's no objection. So with that, I don't know which of you is going to go first.
Linda Wibby, Corporation Counsel for the City of Waterbury. If you don't mind, what I was hoping to do was be able to introduce the people who are here and present and can answer any questions that any of you may have. As you know, back in December, we did give an overview and presentation of what at that time we understood to have occurred in October of 2017 when there was a bypass and an overflow of over $5 million of sewage into the Naugatuck River. We also reported that the city was entering into a consent order with DEP for compliance for monitoring and certain activities. We also reported that we were hiring a forensic electrical consultant to review the current systems to determine if they were in working order and if there was any emergent repairs that needed, as well as to assist us in diagnosing the events that occurred, who was culpable, if anyone, and everyone, and what were our next steps to protect and keep our systems running properly, efficiently, and future recommendations. In addition, we also reported that Human Resource Department would look at the issues with respect to personnel, city personnel, and staffing, and they're here to report their efforts today with respect to looking at the organizational chart, job descriptions, and functions of the employees that were involved in this incident and should have been involved in this incident. So, having said all of that, 2 weeks ago, I submitted a rather technical report from Kugler Associates, who was the forensic electrical consultant who reviewed the systems, reviewed them for the on an emergency basis as to whether or not they were viable and what emergency repairs needed to be done, as well as looking at what was the root cause of what happened, and gave us plans for future reference. They actually issued 3 reports in total. It's off the same format. The first one was the electrical and technical one, which Chuck Pagano is going to go over with you. As an engineer, he can reduce it down to layman's terms in a much better fashion than I can. And then they also had some what happened and how it happened report, which is basically the December report that we had provided to you previously and just fine-tuned it. At that time, Kugler recommended some personnel issues be looked at, and Scott Morgan, the Director of Human Resources, I think is here. If not, I'll report on his behalf if he's not in the chambers at this time. And then also, Dennis Cuevas is here, or he will be available to answer any questions with respect to DEP, the consent order, what we're doing now, and what we plan on doing in the future. So those are our very knowledgeable staff personnel that are here, and we're calling Mr. Pagano staff, although this is purely voluntary on his part to help us out, and we thank him for his efforts. And of course, the police department's here as to the initial investigation and the facts, primarily what we reported back in December. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to, Chuck, do you mind if I leave these? These are all the reports. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pagano so he can go over the forensic electrical report that I handed out 2 weeks ago.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just so you know, I worked at ESPN for 35 years. I headed up the technology and engineering department there. This sort of a debacle happened to me back in 1985, which actually helped mold my psyche around robust power systems so that you never go off the air. So I equate sewage effluent and sports broadcasting in the same manner. You can't lose power because one will be off the air without money, the other one you'll be getting fined by the State Department of Environmental Protection going forward. Eric Kugler did a wonderful job on his reports. It's very technical. One thing that they have pressed in there, and the mantra down on Municipal Road, is stabilizing the incident. There is a heads-up mindset, always looking for what is potential scenarios where we might have a problem. That night on October 9th, or afternoon, a live cable was cut by a contractor. The cable was still energized in manhole number 7, and they call it feeder F4. That was the main 13,800 volt feeder line coming from the Eversource. The fault that was done in the manhole, erroneously, was a live cut by an electrician. The calculated amperage, amps, was almost 8,900 amps. That's a lot of amps. When I was in electrical engineering school back in the 70s, it was inundated into my mind. 100 milliamps could be fatal to the human body. That's 0.1 amp. So there was 8,800 amps going on in that vault. 13,000 volt stuff is major league. It's not high voltage, they classify it medium voltage. But not many people have that much experience with the 13.8. In fact, it's the only city facility that I know that utilizes 13,800 volts. The present situation down there is that the emergency repair procedures and initial repair have been done. A lot of effort was focused on the 13.8 distribution and generator backup system, including that F4 feeder, which was down for a while. It was a good team effort with HMV, the contractor, Kugler, the folks down at the Waterbury Sewage Department, and it was a learning curve for most people. Causing some of the issues that were down there was it is such a complex facility, there is really no one who is the lead knowledge base for dealing with the power scenarios down there. Linda had mentioned that we've been working with Scott Morgan on building up a robust sort of environment to see where do we need to fill the holes. One of the key was to get a lead person delineated on a job description, not hired, but delineated, to get that position going, to make sure that we have an experienced, intellectually smart person who's going to be the point person down there, and it's going to be a 4-person class. It was recommended that all the system hardware and the components should have been recommissioned, which they have been done. That means they went through with a fine-tooth comb during the debugging part. There were also preemptive measures that were tabulated by the consultant. One of them was to build up and get a portable generator. It's a 480-volt generator, 3-phase, that is at the pump room so that if we did run into problems, we have an external generator that will pump the effluent into a tank so that it doesn't spill out into the river again. There's been a lot of coordination studies by that understanding the systemic. This plant was 1999, so it's going on 20 some odd, almost 30 years. There's some challenges with the plant. Things have happened during the time that they turned on. There is a precious piece of equipment that we're focusing on, Dennis is, on getting replaced. It's called the programmable logic controller, which basically runs the operation. The technical part of the generator startup and the switch gear and the paralleling gear down there. It is circa 1993 vintage, which was about 20, almost 30 years ago. It's not made anymore. It's called a GE 90-30. It is, they just served last and final notice on that brand from GE early last year, and that was just to make sure that they were covered. They actually took it out of product cycle back in the year 2013. That is one piece that we got to get replaced, along with having the code transported over from the current implementation to the new. We're also recommended in his study, on Kugler's study, is to look at the overall planning going long term. How do we rebuild? How do we make it even more robust than what it is now? And we're going to put the plan together so that we at least have a plan. And then when we have our ideas concrete, then we'll be coming before you looking for help and aid. So with that, I'd like to open. Are there any questions for me? Sure.
Alderman Sherman?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for coming down today.
You sure?
Since all this has taken place, it's been brought to our attention that there wasn't a true disaster recovery plan. Is that still the case, and has that been worked on? Am I incorrect in that assumption?
Not in totality. I think there are pockets of disaster recovery that were in play. I think this, I look at it as a perfect storm. It happened on a day off and it was on a holiday. I think people were scrambling because it happened the way it happened. There are disaster recovery scenarios there. And I'm not so sure how well, when you're severing a 13,000 volt line and you got almost 9,000 amps of current. I know people have said that the generators didn't come online. The generators did their job. I think the reflected power coming back from that power line is probably what triggered everything, along with the old PLC. It sort of got discombobulated. And a PLC is a computer, but it's a real-time computer that's basically monitoring and scanning as it's doing. I think it took a hit because of the reflected power coming back.
Have we made adjustments to?
Yep.
Just to also let you know, the WPC has retained two consultants, Woodard & Curran and Tyne Bond, and both the emergency plans, one for the plant and one for the collection system, have been updated and implemented. So we now do have emergency systems and protocol in place. In addition, as part of that, and working with Kugler, a communication system and protocol has been put in place. That communication also includes notifying all downstream towns and municipalities. It includes notifying the mayor's office or the mayor directly of any bypass or overflow or emergent situation, and they're defined. It also includes notifying the public. The public will be notified by radio, and I believe other public media, as well as website posting in and around the area. So the issue of some of the communications issues that were persistent on that evening and thereafter have been addressed through communications protocol, as well as two revised emergency plans.
So we've also made adjustments to policies and procedures to ensure that this type of work doesn't happen on a holiday weekend?
Yes, I think the answer is a lot of learning was achieved during that debacle, most definitely. I'm not so sure how much you guys absolutely knew that was going to happen on the holiday. That was part of the debacle with having a third party sitting on the campus without an oversight from the management of the facility. You want to put anything else on there?
Does Synagro have liability in this as well?
Yep.
So also, to further advance that question, just to also let you know, other things that we have done at the direction of the mayor, an RFP, or request for proposal, has been prepared. It will be going out for publication this week for looking at ideas of potential contractors or other vendors coming in to look at the issues of plant management, and has been segregated into different parcels to give us an idea if that's a viable option or not. In addition, Human Resources has gone through the organizational chart of WPC as well as other personnel and looked at, as Chuck said, the job descriptions, what was needed with respect to expertise, and also looking at the job descriptions and the chain of command and who reports to whom. And those changes will be implemented or in progress right now. With respect to Synagro, we do have a contract with Synagro, and the contract specifically provides that Synagro will indemnify and hold the city harmless for any of its acts or the acts of its subcontractors or contractors. I have made a written demand of Synagro. Currently, we have $285,000 in known costs. That does not include full compliance with the consent order or labor charges or employee expense, so that we have not calculated. Synagro is aware of it. I have been in communication with their attorneys. They will be processing that estimate, if you will, because we don't have final billing and everything, and they will be passing it along to their insurers for subrogation against Connecticut Central Cable Company or any other contractor that they may find to be responsible. Our remedy is with Synagro, and we have put a written demand on them. They've been working cooperatively with us. We've provided them information all along the way under an agreement that we will be working in a non-adversarial manner to assist them in processing the claim as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I had one more, and I think the last time we had public discussion on this, the mayor made mention that this may become an HR issue with personnel. Has any of that come to fruition?
So HR Scott Morgan is continuing to look at the issues with respect to the job descriptions and organizational, and he's conducting investigations. Those are right now at this point confidential personnel investigations and ongoing reviews.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Alderman Cotto?
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yep.
You mentioned that failing on having the system prepared for a catastrophe like that, and also the personnel not being prepared or not having the correct personnel to address that were two issues, and you have addressed it already. You have explained what processes are you taking. What is going to be the frequency to evaluate both the system and the personnel to ensure that in any event in the future we are prepared at all times?
I think the key thing that we're doing right now is trying to build up the robust ability of having the right person and persons focused on the electrical side of the equation. There is no one in-house that had, you got a very fine electrician down on Municipal Road, but nobody's got the experience with 13.8 kilovolts. That's a unique specialty subset in the open market. I think the first thing is to put out the fire, and then we'll look at what happens as a function of the evolution of the department. But I think I'm just helping out and giving the guidance that I had when I worked at ESPN, what I went through some 30 years ago when I had my own emergency that took us off the air for 5.5 hours. That was revenue related. Same scenario, and I'm going to be giving them as much help as we can. But right now, we're just trying to get all the tentacles around all the variables to make sure that we got everything sort of covered from an emergency standpoint. And then we'll worry about fine-tuning the mechanism on how the reviews and how the growth happens. But your question is totally valid. I think it's still too early for us to give you a concrete answer because we're still trying to put the fire out. Okay? Thank you.
Further questions? Alderman Martinez McCarthy.
My question is for Ms. Wibby, Attorney Wibby. My question to you is as to the demand that was sent to Synagro, is there an estimated time when they will have to respond or anything of that nature?
No, it's also dependent on when we have information, and I suppose one more of the list of things that is in the process. May 12th will be our Family Fish Day. The city of Waterbury is being required to stock the river with various trout. How many, Dennis? 1,500. It will be a fun family activity with balloons and fish. So Dennis has been engaged and is engaging various community groups, and I believe you're also using Captain Dan Lauer. Is he working on it to help clean the river? And there are ongoing efforts to that extent that we don't have a price on yet. We will be providing that, and like I said, we still will be providing information as to our labor costs, any overtime associated with it that we have not provided. As I said, we have approximately $285,000 in costs that we know of. We have sent it to Synagro, and that amount, and I anticipate that Synagro will fully cooperate and indemnifying us as we provide them supportive documentation of all our expenses.
Okay, and you also have, I understand, a contract with Synagro. Is there anything in there that specifies any binding arbitration, or real arbitration, anything of that nature?
I really don't like binding arbitration. We don't have a binding arbitration clause in it, but what we do have instead is the provision that they have to reimburse us for every cost. They will not only reimburse us and indemnify for anything we do, but they will also pay us for attorney's fees and costs in association with it, including any regulatory agency or any activity we have to do by, like, if, for example, the DEP consent order for cleaning the river, for having the fish day, and the like. So they are required to reimburse us as a term of the contract. Their failure to do so will result that they're in default of that contract, and we could terminate the contract with them,
Okay.
which is a much more immediate response than having to go to arbitration.
Okay,
Thank you.
Alderman Duchesne?
Thank you, Mr. President. Attorney Wibby, one of the things you mentioned was to, if God forbid something like this happens again, you know, you're going to alert the public, surrounding towns. Is there, what are the plans on alerting the public more specifically? You know, obviously, like, I have kids in the school system. Snow day, I get a call. Are people going to be, is there going to be a system where people can sign up for things like this? Or how do you?
All right, so I don't know that we looked into the reverse 911 system, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. But there is a chain of calling all of the downstream municipal leaders, as well as placing it on the local radio and print ad, as well as posting signs. I do believe the mayor's office will, the mayor will alert you. There's nothing better than that.
I'm sorry.
There's been a whole protocol of people that need to be contacted that's been put into place, from television to Facebook to our website to personal phone calls to every town manager downstream, and including the mayor's office, by the way.
Okay. I was going to say, is obviously, again, that afternoon, that gentleman was there by himself that he was cutting. From our understanding from several meetings ago, he literally got a picture from a proposal, and that's why he cut the wrong wire, correct, if I remember correctly?
Basically.
How do we make sure that in the future, it's not just one person going to do a job like that, that there's, again, a chain of commands supervising this, not just on, you know, not doing it on holidays, but again, make sure that there's a chain of commands.
Right, and I think that's been identified as the most important factor in liability exposure from the city's perspective. You heard Mr. Pagano talk about how dangerous that situation was down there, and I'm telling you, it's a miracle that guy didn't get killed in that hole. Having said that, and as a result of that, you know, that's why HR has been so intricately involved in this as well. That's why we have an RFP that's going out this week. And we really want to look at our options. We want to look at what's the most efficient way to run the plant. Maybe we're doing it fine now. We just had some lapses in protocols. Dennis is here. I respect him for being here. You know, maybe the city of Waterbury needs to provide a little bit more support and oversight. So we'll know an awful lot more in the next 30 days when we have different companies come in and analyze and review the day-to-day operations of the plant, and we'll be happy to report back with you. We're going to have an open house there with the respondents of the RFP on April 4th.
April 4th?
Yeah. Okay. So anyone from this board would be more than welcome to come on down and participate in that process as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Attorney Wibby.
Any other questions? Alderman Lopez?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a quick question, most likely probably for Council Woodby. I am wondering where we stand with the consent order from DEEP, and also are they satisfied with the actions that we've taken? I know I am, but are they?
Yeah, I'm very happy to report, and Dennis can answer more technically than I can. We have submitted all the reports timely. I have 17 copies with me here tonight of all the reports that have been submitted. Most of our obligations to DEP have been satisfied, and they are satisfied with the environmental testing and the reports concerning E. coli and the like at various sites. So if you have specific questions, I could turn it over to Dennis, but I did bring 17 copies of the DEP status, if you guys would like copies of that.
Would love copies of that, yeah. And since you're there, are there any legal issues still pending with DEP, or is this part of the process?
This is part of the process, and in the consent order, there were action items that were listed on paragraph B of that consent order, and we've gone through every single one of those action items, and we are in complying of all those items. We have received also letters from the DEP indicating that we are in compliance. One of those letters were received on January 22nd, and then there's other items that obviously have not been completed yet because it's not yet, the date hasn't been scheduled yet, like the trout restacking that's being scheduled for April 25th, and then the fishing date, which is being scheduled on May 12th. So once those dates come and go, we'll be sending a correspondence to DEP so that we could get a letter indicating that we're in compliance.
You got to come closer to the mic, otherwise the
A very bad situation, but out of it, a lot of systems improved. Synagro has been providing its regular test results to the city clerk's office, I think either monthly or quarterly, including air tests and other environmental tests. It is required to produce to the DEP. So no longer are they just going up to the state, they are now being filed with the city clerk's office, and they are available to the public.
Okay. Just a follow-up question, Mr. Cuevas. So I see here on your chart 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5, 6 different letters. I would love to receive, when you get one of these letters, I would love to receive a copy of the letters here. You don't have to come in and to the meetings, but I would love to just be part of either a receive and place on file, just as a follow-up so that we are kept informed. I think that legally, this is one of the aspects that I was really interested in. As I said, I was very satisfied with the response from the mayor's office, your department. But this is key and essential so that we know when we are asked questions out there. Thank you.
Sure, I can make copies of that letter, of those letters and any other letters that come in and make them available for the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Alderman DiGiovancarlo.
I guess anyone who wants to answer this. We did not find a city employee responsible for any of this, correct, as far as cutting the cable?
So it begins and ends with a subcontractor to a subcontractor who cut a live cable.
Right.
There was not any city employee involved in that.
Right, and I'm pretty sure if you do get a sketchy map and you're about to cut a 13,000-volt cable, I would assume you should probably test it first before you cut it and maybe not rely on a map if it is kind of sketchy.
Definitely should have said a lot of prayers.
And if there was city oversight, and they're standing there, I don't think any of them would have stopped the guy from making the mistake and cutting the wrong cable, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if this was like a manhole, I mean, it was
Right.
underground, and I don't know that any city employee would have been down there with them, even if he cut the right one or wrong one. You have to have certain certification for closed space, confined working, and other issues. I think Mr. Pagano is probably more credible on this issue than I am, but I wouldn't want to be that.
If they were at my old shop up in Bristol, there'd be a person there standing with them to do lockout, tagout in case there was a problem to yank them out of the manhole.
Okay.
Number one, there was no oversight from the contractor's company, making sure the guy was doing it. In fact, you mentioned the wrong picture. He had the shop drawing. He didn't have shop drawings. He had the bid documents that he was working against, and he picked the wrong cable.
Right.
Ours is F4A. He was supposed to be cutting F3A, which is totally different circuit.
Again, not a city employee's fault, a
No,
contractor's
contractor.
fault.
There was
Right.
no. It was a.
Right.
It was Columbus Day. There was no city
Right.
employee there,
Very
other than the operators that were on duty.
Okay, just making sure, very clear that, you know, maybe some mistakes were made afterwards, but it was a mistake of a contractor that caused this whole catastrophe.
That's
Okay.
the trickle-down effect that I've been made aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Cotto?
Are you gonna come back and report to us the final plan once all the processes discussed tonight are completed?
Oh, most definitely, this is just the beginning of the process to make sure where we're going. We got to plan an attack going forward, so we don't lose sleep at night going through this again.
Thank you.
Alderman Sherman?
Thank you, Mr. President. With proper policies and procedures, would there have been a city employee there with this contractor?
My understanding, there should have been, but it was on Columbus Day, and there was no city employee there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Alderman DiGio Von Carlo?
With proper procedure, would a city worker be in a hole with a guy cutting 13,000 volt cable? Would that be our policy to stand in a
You
man?
would be witnessing it and making sure you're giving the oversight, though he's hitting the right one, and making sure
And he
that
would
he's
be
there.
in the, he would be in the manhole with him?
No, he wouldn't have to be in a manhole.
Right.
He could be right above him.
Okay.
There's not enough physical space, so you usually get two
Okay.
people down there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything further? Hearing none, thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
The next presentation is the Palace Theater, and as you know, I think it's item 11 in our package this evening was a letter from Frank Davino raising some concerns that he has about the Palace, and there's been some chatter on Facebook about it as well. So the thought was that we would have the chairman or the CEO and a couple of board members come down and just talk about what the process is, especially for booking shows, how the Palace operates, the finances and those things. So we'll have them do a short presentation, and then we can go to some questions based on that. So.
Good evening, and thank you very much.
Just as you welcome up, because we know you, would you just state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Dr. Peter Jacoby. I'm chairman of the emergency department at St. Mary's Hospital, and I'm also chairman of the board of directors of the Palace Theater. And I actually thank you for allowing us to come before you. There's been a lot in the newspapers recently about the Palace Theater. We would like to explain some of the way the Palace operates. So we have been asked to come here today. The CEO, Frank Tavera, is with me, and the vice chair of our board, Frank Montero. I will turn this over to Frank Tavera, our CEO, for a short presentation, and I will remain here to answer any questions that I possibly can. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Frank Tavera. I'm the CEO of the Palace Theater. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And it's also a nice opportunity for us to talk about what's been discussed in the paper and social media these recent days, perhaps dispel any of the misinformation that's been out there, and really kind of explain a little bit about what we do at the theater and how our operation works. First, I want to address the fact that in 2003, when we took over, when we took the ownership of or management of the theater on the city's behalf, we accepted a mission statement, and I want to read that mission statement to everyone. The mission clearly stated it was to build a strong sense of community and appreciation for the arts by operating, maintaining, and sustaining the Palace Theater as a financially viable, not-for-profit performing arts center that provides artistic, cultural, educational, social, and financial impact to the greater Waterbury area. I'll get my water. We stress the words greater Waterbury area because as of late, there have been comments by many in the community that state that the Palace Theater should solely be focusing on Waterbury and Waterbury proper. Unfortunately, the challenge with that statement is that when the funding came into place for the Palace Theater, the $30 million was generated from the state of Connecticut. And in turn, we continually receive annual funding from the state as well, as we are a designated line item recipient as a cultural institution. And we, the Bushnell in Hartford, the Schubert in New Haven, Stanford Center for the Arts, and a host of other venues as well, we all have that designation of being a regional cultural asset. So to that point, the idea of solely being beholden to or solely focusing on Waterbury proper is a challenge for us as an institution because we are obligated to the state to continue to serve our greater Waterbury area. Excuse me. Although our programming efforts do not go geographically, we don't target any specific markets, we do market as well, primarily to New Haven counties, Litchfield counties, and Fairfield counties, as we, the Palace Theater, really represent the western part of the state of Connecticut. The Bushnell in Hartford represents the more eastern part, and the Schubert New Haven really does represent the southern portion of the state as a performing arts center, which we are. Annually, the theater welcomes about 100,000 patrons through the door, and that is for all events, special events, as well as private functions as well. We're proud to state that of our Broadway subscribers, 20% of our subscription base comes from the city of Waterbury. And when we look at the aggregate of our total attendees for all single nights, et cetera, 10% of those residents of Waterbury attend and frequent the Palace. Additionally, in our mission, we clearly stated that our goal is to operate, maintain, and sustain, and the words financially viable, not-for-profit performing arts centers are critical. Our commitment to financial stewardship is critical to the Palace Theater and the City of Waterbury, as our operating management agreement, as we shortly refer to it as the OMA, and you'll hear that later on as well, with the city specifically outlines our fiscal responsibility. I want to take a couple minutes to outline those financial obligations, because there's been some of that in the press as well that I think has been misrepresented. One of the primary goals of the OMA was to ensure that the Palace was in no way, shape, or form a financial burden on the City of Waterbury and its taxpayers. So clearly is it stated in the OMA that in the event the Palace were unable to sustain itself financially, the city would have no financial obligation to support the theater in itself. So we have taken that very seriously, and we've put forward I think a financial process that has really alleviated the city from being exposed in any way, shape, or form to the Palace and its finances. I want to clarify a couple things as well. The only funding the Palace receives from the City of Waterbury is the $250,000 that we receive from the Board of Education, and that's for the implicit usage from the Waterbury Arts Magnet School. That funding equates to about 30 days worth of activity, which is about 1 month of our season that gets utilized for the Arts Magnet School. It was considered an opportunity cost or potential lost revenue to the theater, as it could not, in fact, present any other presentations while the school and the students were utilizing that space. It's coming. Contrary to a lot of the other public comments that were made, the Palace does, in fact, reimburse the city for any and all of the expenses. And I want to outline a few of them. We reimburse the city for insurance, our pro-rata share of the Palace Theater itself, and a portion of the Scoville Street parking garage. We reimburse the city for all police, fire, and parking personnel for any event usage when any personnel is on site for any of our events. And we also reimburse the city for utilities. We pay our own utilities directly, and we also reimburse the city for any portion which is generated from the Waterbury Arts Magnet School. I highlight these specific expenses as, again, in the paper and on social media, there's been some misleading comments that saying that the Palace doesn't pay the City of Waterbury, and or all the community users and groups should have free access to the theater because it doesn't cost anything to run our space. If one were only to consider the 3 items that I addressed, insurance, police and fire and parking personnel, and utilities, if you were to take the aggregate expense for the year, if you were divided by the 200 events, dates of activity that we have in the building, the minimum daily cost to operate the Palace Theater is $3,000. $3,000 only provides you with those 3 services I identified. It does not include any ticketing service, it doesn't include house staff, it doesn't include marketing, it doesn't include custodial or cleanup, it doesn't include artist fee, a performer fee, or stagehands. Bare minimum in the door, just to daily operations, $3,000. When we look at those financial realities, running the theater and being able to have access to all users who want to use the space, it's a challenge because there are certain organizations who may not otherwise be able to afford this space because of those inherent costs. But we, in fact, have to pay those bills. In addition to reimbursing the city for the expenses I've identified, the Palace is also required to maintain a capital improvement fund on behalf of the city that can solely be used for physical and capital improvements. The fund was set up to guarantee that the city would not be asked to pay for any improvements to the theater while the Palace Theater Group was managing it. For every paid admission, $1 is placed in a segregated account for that express purpose. The fund to this date totals about $429,000, as we recently had to use some of those funds to improve the steel structure to accommodate the Phantom of the Opera chandelier, which just recently played in November. As soon as any of that fund is used, the Palace is required to replenish the said disbursement at the rate of $1 until the fund reaches a minimum of $500,000, plus the identified growth based on the Consumer Price Index, which is a whole different mathematical thing. We won't get into that tonight. Again, all these financial requirements were established to safeguard the city from any financial liability associated to the Palace Theater, and which has been kind of the basis for the way that we model our organization. Like our colleagues in Hartford, New Haven, the Palace Theater operates as a not-for-profit presenting house. I clearly state that because unlike organizations like the Seven Angels, Thomaston Opera House, or the Warner Theater that curate and produce their own work, the Palace was restored and renovated to present larger-scale touring productions, such as the Phantom of the Opera, this week's sold-out presentation of Jersey Boys, or concerts like David Byrne or Kool and the Gang, which took place in January. The idea of the Palace producing its own programs is not consistent with the intent of the restored Palace, nor can it be physically accomplished given the limited amount of space that we have backstage. There is no prop shop. There is no wig room. There's no costume design shop. We basically have space to load in a show, put on a show, and load out a show within a day's period of time. Back in 2002, when the initial business plan was being formulated for the Palace, the powers that be expressly stated the Palace should serve as a complement to organizations like Seven Angels and not directly compete for those services, to ensure that both our organizations could survive and thrive and provide increased cultural experiences within the greater Waterbury community. A recent document issued made a notion that the Palace should be producing small-scale events as well as serving as a home for organizations like Seven Angels. Sadly, that plan doesn't work in this current market and the way the theater was recently restored. As a not-for-profit, like our peers across the country, the standard business model for a theater like the Palace is to offset operating expenses by soliciting donations and sponsor support. Most not-for-profit performing arts centers like the Palace operate on a 50% earned income, ticket sales, and a 50% contributed income, donations. If one were to view the 990s for any 501c3 performing arts center like ours, they would find the reliance on contributed income is critical to theater like ours and is a necessary aspect of our day-to-day operations. Vital fundraising initiatives include funding daily operations, programmatic support, as well as securing endowments for the long-term stability of the theater. To those in the community that stated the Palace should be able to operate without designated funds, I encourage them to share their ideas with me. There's a national industry that has not been unable to figure out the solution to this model. And if someone has a wonderful idea how we could be able to do so, I would encourage that dialogue. But it is definitely a business model that is challenged, but it is the business model we are in. Annually, the Palace raises about $900,000, and that doesn't include the state support that we received. We began with $900,000 from the state. We were dropped down to $500,000 from the state, then to $350,000, and we are currently experiencing $157,000 from the state of Connecticut in annual support, if in fact we receive it all. Organizations like ours, the Schubert, the Bushnell, and Stanford all receive that same amount from the state of Connecticut. With each decrease in state support, puts more pressure on us as an organization to find new donors, corporate sponsors, and organizations to provide grants to help underwrite our day-to-day expenses. The pressure on not-for-profits to raise dollars to offset expenses is enormous. To date, the Palace has built a board-advised fund, as we loosely refer to as an endowment, of more than $3 million. This fund also ensures the theater a sustainable future, and in the event of any operating loss, can assist in eliminating any short-term deficit. Per the OMA, the Palace is required to engage in no less than 100 days of activities per year. 300 days over a 3-year period of time on average. For this season, the Palace projects, and this season is 2017 to 2018. We have a fiscal year that goes July to June. We're projecting about 224 dates of activity within the space. 67 stage events, 34 technical days, days which the theater cannot be used because a show is either loading in or loading out. So there's activity in the building, but commercial presentations cannot take place. We have 30 days for WAM's presentations, 63 special event dates, which include weddings, private parties, etc. And we have 30 small space presentations as well, totaling 224 for this year. Over the past 3 years, the Palace has consistently exceeded 200 annual dates of activity. By comparison, the Schubert in New Haven totaled 197 for the season 16-17, the year prior, and Stanford Center totaled 155 in 16-17. I'd also want to take 2 seconds to acknowledge the fact that we, the Palace Theater, our theater in Waterbury, Connecticut, has recently been recognized as a 2017 Top 200 Worldwide Venue in Polestar magazine. This is nothing you buy a ticket for. This is nothing you pay for to get the acknowledgement. You need to have number of events. You need to have number of butts in seats, as they say, paid admission, in order to receive that acknowledgement. It is something that this community should be proud of, because this includes venues from Europe, as well as Radio City Music Hall to the Palace Theater in Waterbury, Connecticut. It's an impressive acknowledgement, and it's something that we should be celebrating. We're getting there. Like our colleagues in Hartford and New Haven, our primary programming focus continues to be touring Broadway musical productions, which was one of the reasons the theater was renovated to accommodate theaters of that, productions of that size and scope. Historically, Broadway subscribers tend to be the venue's most loyal patrons in frequency and in attendance and in their capacity to give at the donor level. Basically, to use a theater term, it's a circle of life for a performing arts center. You have a frequent engaged patron, you build a sense of loyalty, you encourage them to for philanthropic support. It's what we do. It's our core business, and it is what keeps us and keeps the ball rolling for us to continue to engage in better programming, increase attendance, and raise those contributed dollars, which are so desperately needed. Along with the inherent benefit of presenting touring Broadway performances comes the requirement of a venue of our size to be affiliated with the local stagehands to accommodate the arduous task of loading in, loading out a show in a timely and professional manner. These skilled crew members bring expertise and confidence to a touring production that the show will go up properly, will go out properly, and will make it to its next destination, which is often enough the next business day. Recently, it was addressed that the local union makes it expensive for community groups to utilize a theater. We do have a carve-out in our contract that does allow for reduced work rules and concessions for community groups and educational organizations. And we'd be happy to sit with any organization to work out the finances for them to see whether it makes sense for them to be in the Palace Theater. Just because you want to be in the Palace Theater doesn't mean it may make financial sense for you as an organization or for the venue itself to be able to put on the show. So we're happy to have those conversations and meetings with anyone. In addition to Broadway, we also present one-night musical concerts, various family and theatrical programming. We have a jazz series that continues to grow. We do R&B dance events and concerts. We provide after-work trivia nights, a number of dance recitals and competitions, WAMS events, high school graduations, as well as college graduations, and a host of other activities. Traditionally, our presentation schedule is geared towards September through June. And keep in mind that 30 days of that September to June is allocated to the Waterbury Arts Magnet School. And we have usually light activity taking place in the month of January, immediately following the holidays, for financial and weather reasons. And that is something that we've learned on through history. Based on our performance history, market potential, fiscal realities, and statewide competition, the Palace Theater traditionally does little programming in the summertime. July and August are traditionally quiet, where we focus our attention on renting the building for special events, weddings, where there's little financial risk to the theater, yet providing a service to various patrons interested in utilizing the space. The competitive nature of the state in the state of Connecticut, the challenge we face in attracting artists, the varying deal terms that go along with each performance in each venue, the financial risk associated with booking the theater is something that we can discuss during the Q&A because it's way too detailed, it's very, very nuanced, but I'd love to have that conversation with you at some point. In addition to everything I just told you, in addition to working with the Waterbury Arts Magnet School, we also engage in a host of community events and activities, which most people don't even realize. We offer an 8-week after-school program based on any one of our touring Broadway productions, tied in with the Common Core, 21st century learning skills, and we work to engage students for after-school engagement to further their interest in the arts. We have a Learning in the Wings program, which is a hands-on initiative where students can job shadow the union stagehands, learn a technical craft, such as lighting, sound, etc., and actually use those skills to further their career if that's what they're interested in doing. We have a ticket and travel subsidy fund where we raise close to $5,000 and use those funds to offset the expenses of tickets so children and students who otherwise might not be able to afford the theater can attend shows. We have master classes that we provide to the Waterbury Arts Magnet students where touring cast members from any of the shows will provide vocal, acting, dancing master classes for these students who are interested in learning not only the craft, but life on the road or being in the arts. And there are a host of other ones. I'm not going to talk about those. We also provide 25 cents per paid admission to the Arts and Culture Collaborative, which is Greater Waterbury's kind of consortium organization that oversees all the arts within the community. To date, we gave about $200,000 to the ACC, as we call it, about $15,000 a year, and that is used to help promote the arts within the Greater Waterbury community, help educate people, and advocate for support at the state capitol. We give out more than 300 complimentary tickets to organizations who in turn use those tickets to raise money for their own organizations, different fundraising events. We offer a rental subsidy program, which is a reduced rental rate for community groups and education groups, so they can try to work with us and work within the theater. And there are a host of other ones. Lastly, I want us to say we know there's a couple of outstanding issues. We know that we need to improve our efforts in community engagement and diversifying our programming, and we've made steps within that area to do so. We acknowledge the fact that our financial reporting to the city has become lax. And please note, it was simply an error and change in staff and job responsibilities. We've addressed the issue with Finance Director and the City Clerk, and we will be up to date with our reporting from this point forward. And as relates to our 2016-2017 audited financials, which have been asked for by the Finance Director, our board meets on March 27th. The final audited financials are in place. They will be approved next Tuesday, and they will be in the hands of the City Clerk and the Finance Director on March 27th. I know there's a lot of information. I know I talk fast. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, as I'm sure I didn't cover everything that you wanted to hear. So,
questions? Alderman Cotto.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for that presentation.
No problem.
How many students do you serve yearly in the after-school program?
In the after-school program, it is by design, it's about 75 students who take place. They have to volunteer to participate. They have to commit to an 8-week program, and they have to commit to attending this program 3 days a week. So it is one of those where we have students that are interested in, and then we find out that the time commitment based on sports and other activities seems to be a limit, but about 75 regularly throughout the program.
And in regards, you mentioned that you were working on diversifying.
Yes.
What steps are you following to do that?
Well, I think the most important thing is, and I'll be the first to say, is that we need to, as an organization, need to have a better understanding of what the community wants to see. It's not easy to be in our position to sit down and say, hey, I love this program, it's going to work for you. So we need to have better communications with members within the community, whether Latino, African American, or whichever, to find out what types of programs they're interested in, what types of artists would entertain them enough and force them or have them consider attending the Palace Theater. And once we start that dialogue, figure out how financially we can end up developing that. And more importantly, working on how we can build an audience within the community so it doesn't appear as if we're just presenting one show in hopes to be that one answer without having a further dialogue and looking to expand that relationship.
Do you already have a plan? How are you going to connect with the community?
I've met with someone this afternoon. I won't name names, but most of you know him, who's a very solid representative of the Latino community. We're going to put together a group of individuals, sit down, have a cup of coffee, address the current issues, and address the perception of the Palace Theater and how people perhaps may not feel as if they're welcomed or engaged or invited into, and then address how we can move forward, either programmatically through community engagement, and then to opening that dialogue, yes. I'd be happy to share that afterwards, too.
I would love to hear more.
Thank you.
Further questions? Alderman Lopez?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Tavera, it's a pleasure to have you here. I must tell you, as you know, I served as a member of the board of directors at the Palace Theater. I know how engaged the membership is. I've also sat down with you and discussed opportunities on cultural events, and you were right on spot saying sometimes when you have the discussion, it just doesn't make sense. You know, the event just doesn't fit there. Your staff is ultra professional. I mean, I've dealt with your staff for many, many years, and I've always appreciated the openness, the welcoming. Now, having said all these great things, and I'm wondering, you know, I see Dr. Jacoby here, Mr. Montero, has the board of directors taken on the dialogue that maybe, just maybe, it is time to look at that mission statement, maybe tweak a bit on the business plan, just to, I mean, I heard numbers that, I'm not sure if I'm correct, you mentioned 10%, some of your overall attendance from Waterbury was 10%?
Correct.
Yeah, so I'm just, you know, I know you guys are great, and we are actually happy and blessed to have you there on the board. And I know that you fight for Waterbury, so maybe it is just time, Dr. Jacoby, that we look at this business model and kind of tweak it a bit.
It's a great point, and I agree with you 100%. And actually, I took over as chair in September and came in with a couple of ideas, because everyone always does when they first come in. And one of them was a greater committee structure. A second thing was to look at the bylaws, and are they current? Because what was written in 2003 doesn't necessarily fit for 2018. And the other is the whole agreement. Should we go through something that was written in the year 2000 when we were just an idea and starting off compared to where we are today? So the committee structure, and Frank can attest to this because we put people on committees, includes also the Public Relations Committee. So not only do you have a staff person, but you have board members and others that we're looking to bring on the board on the committee. And the same with the programming committee. So now we will send emails because we have double responsibility, programming and a fiduciary responsibility. So there are times we can say, are we going to take a bath on this? Can we afford this? And I will tell you all that when I first joined the board, Frank did something that I found fascinating. He handed out, here's the shows we have to date. You rate them 1 through 5. Whoever gets the highest, we're going to buy you a dinner or whatever at the end of the year. The highest number was 50%. That's how much of a guessing game it becomes. When you first book something, you think, oh, this is a home run. If it snows, you're out of luck. And yet I look at what we have started to do this year and the fact that we're up to 1,950 subscriptions to the Broadway, which is the highest number we've been at since 2004. And I look at the number of shows we're putting on. I look at the fact that we were able to bring in Phantom of the Opera. I will tell you, next weekend's already sold out. So it is building, and it takes some risk, because last year's Sound of Music was a risk. You know, it's an 8-day show, and that's a hard sell sometimes. So it is, and you're right, it's looking at it, it's tweaking it, it's looking at the agreement and saying, what can we do to make it better? I agree.
Right, and listen, I'll be the first one to sit here and tell you that on the business aspect, Frank is a great leader. I understand that. I know where the Palace was, I know where it stands today. So financially, I am definitely grateful. Now, having you stand there with Mr. Montero kind of opens the door. You guys are Waterbury guys. You're gonna, if there's any issues, I'm sure that you're going to fix this. So it is a little challenging, but I think you guys are gonna come up to the plate and hit a grand slam, and I look forward to some changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, because we have committed to making it better every single year. Not that it's not good, but you can always get it a little bit better.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Alderman Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said you got 10% for the city of Waterbury. What are you going to do to change it from 10% to maybe 25, 30%? And what cultural events will you try to get more people to come from the city of Waterbury? Because remember, Waterbury is a multicultural city, so what are you looking to do?
Great question, and I will not name cultural events just because of the fact that, again, I am currently not equipped to say that without furthering that dialogue with many of you who might be interested in doing so. And I open up this conversation truly to say, if we can get together a committee and sit down and say, what events should we be looking at to bring into the Palace Theater? And I want to be clear that we don't need to do the biggest event. It doesn't need to be 2,600 seats in the on the main stage. It could be a 150 event in our lobby, which we do on a regular basis. It could be an 80-person event in our pole vault club in an effort to engage, invite people in, and kind of build that comfort level. We're at that point where I think we're, to Chairman Jacoby's point, we're looking at it and we're going to take an active role in it. So I don't have a definitive answer to it. I'd love to see the programming model shift a bit. I'd love to see the Waterbury numbers increase to represent more so the diverse population that is Waterbury.
Okay.
I will say, when we look at the scope of our attendance base, there's two different tests. There's two different lenses you look through it. When we look at that and say Waterbury only represents 10%, we're very proud of the fact that we've had dramatic impact in getting others to come into this community, from north to south and west, as opposed to solely relying on this community to do so. Because as a regional venue, as one that rests very heavily on kind of the tourism-driven aspect of it, we need the out-of-towners to come to frequent the restaurants, to stay in the hotel, whether from Shelton to Litchfield to Danbury. So it's, as I said, it's a double-edged sword. We're excited. We've made impact and inroads to see different communities come in, but perhaps we have left a little bit on the table as it relates to Waterbury.
Okay.
If that.
Further questions?
I would just add a few things to that, if you don't mind. So we made a commitment to the mayor and to the citizens to have lights on. And lights on doesn't just mean turn the marquee on and have the lights on. It means actually doing something. And we've specifically set things in motion so that we can do that. And this year, we have some very good people that have stepped up to be on the programming committee. They have sought recommendations from the community. It's not what they want to see, it's what the community wants to see. And we've put in some good bids. And I like to use the word or phrase calculated risk.
Okay.
We've made some calculated risk. We've put a $100,000 bid in on somebody, and the guy said no. We've put in a $75,000 bid on somebody, and they said no. So we can't keep chasing.
Okay.
I'm gonna spoil your candy here for a second, but like the month of October, we have 6 acts that all want to come in the month of October. We'd love to have all 6 of these acts. It's probably going to cost us about $350,000 to $400,000 to have these acts, and then, oh, by the way, 2 of them want to come the same 2-3 days. So we have to pick and choose who it is. But I think if you measure us on an 18-month period going forward, I think you're going to see a lot of changes. But more importantly, I think you're going to see a lot of the businesses as well as the other individuals who are living in the downtown area. I think they'll see that difference, especially like the students at UConn and so forth. So it'll be a good build-up from here.
Okay.
Alderman Giacomi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Frank, thank you for coming down, first of all. I think this is good to be able, again, to have this discussion and sort of address some of the things that have been going on in social media, in the press, publicly. So again, thank you and Dr. Jacoby and Mr. Montero. 2 things. Number one, you had already mentioned it, so I did want to thank you for that as well, the financial reports that, I as you know, got asked about and sort of said, well, I don't know. And as I suspected, it turned out it was a matter of turnover. And then I know in speaking with the city's finance director, he is or has been given most of what we've been looking for. And as you mentioned, the rest will be forthcoming. So that's good to know. My question, and you've kind of addressed it already, but I was just wondering, and maybe there's a way to look at this a little more specifically, is I know I believe in the management agreement, there's was originally like a little chart of an assumption of event use dates. And it sort of showed a little ramp up for the first 3 years. And then I believe in the agreement it said fiscal year 06-07 plus, which I assume just means going forward those numbers were to remain the same about assumed event usage and how many would be there. So has there been any thought to revisiting those numbers, whether they made sense, whether we need to rework those targets, or are we just committed to keeping those targets and hitting those targets?
That's a great point, and I would say two things. Number one, the nice part about the operating management agreement, the way it's set up, is that is a minimum number. The event use dates is 100 event use dates. If you calculate solely the activity that we're currently doing within, and that doesn't just mean the big stage, we're at 224. So ideally, moving that number up, it's a baseline number that we're working up. We would financially never be able to succeed if we were solely doing 100 events a year. Right. And so, I think it's a nice benchmark to have there. To that point, we've discussed as a board and as staff, and I think Peter alluded to it as well, is that the operating management agreement was built in 2002 with an organization that was completely skeptical at that point. No one was really certain whether the Palace Theater would still be in operation today if you read the language clearly in the operating management agreement the way it was set up. So I think it gives us an opportunity to revisit that document, perhaps readdress the performance expectations, and look at all those pieces that are otherwise, I think, dated in some way, in some respects. And we find ourselves in a cumbersome situation that the financial reports weren't received on time, but the audits were. I mean, there's little nuances that I think we can work on in partnership with to put together a better document that may move the needle as far as presentations goes as well.
Okay, and that's a good, and that kind of led to my next thought, and I didn't know whether maybe it would be useful going forward if after perhaps a review of these numbers, and I'm looking at it now, and I think it was, and you mentioned this year was 220 or 224. Which is well above, I think, the 170 total that's mentioned in the chart that I'm looking at. And I'm wondering if going forward it would be useful almost as a proactive measure to sort of give occasional updates as far as, here's what's going on in the next month or next few months, and here's what each of these events corresponds to. There will be, 4 things that are classified as Palace presentations, 3 things that are classified as commercial promoted events, et cetera, and that people can sort of keep track and see as they add up and say, oh, the agreement says they should have at least 35 commercially promoted events, and actually I've been looking at the releases they've been putting out, and they're already up to 30, and it's only September. So, well, yeah, they're going to hit that, and that way maybe you could clarify people coming forward trying to say they don't do enough of this or they don't do enough of that, and I don't know what your thought about that might be.
No, I mean, that's a valid point. We do keep track of all the activity, that takes place in the building. It's interesting. Prior to all this conversation taking place, we updated our website, and our website currently has a calendar of events, not for paid ticket events, but more so just an event of activity so that people can look at the building and say, what is going on? Is it a trivia night in the lobby space, which isn't a ticketed event, or is it something in the Pole Light Club, or is it a wedding? So that exists already, so it would be very easy to take that document, put it into a form that actually might be a little bit more easy to read, and so you can gauge the activity. We keep track of it on a regular basis. Sharing that information wouldn't be that hard. So.
Okay, no, perfect. I think that would be useful.
One thing too. I've been thrown out of 2 places in my life. Once was a barbershop in Newport because the guy thought I was a radical when I wanted a short haircut. And the second time was when I showed up at the Palace and I wanted to see the Phantom being set up, and they actually threw me out. So the reason I bring that up is technical days I think are very important too, because when we had the Phantom of the Opera here, it was great. It was great to have it here, but we lost a week beforehand in getting it set up where you could not go past the doors to even peek in I mean, they had security there and everything else. So I think it's great to do this report, but I also want to add that to it as well.
And
So I think
perhaps
it's important.
even make that part of, if not the calendar
Yeah.
on the website.
To
you know,
block
you
it
could
out, to show a
signify
technical
these
day.
days are technical setup days.
Yep.
And that way anybody looking and saying, well, what's the problem? Why isn't it open? Well, look, these days they're setting up. We can't be open or something like that.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. President.
Anything further? Alderman Lopez?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Frank, I almost called you Frank. Well, you are Frank. Yeah. To be fair, and probably to answer Alderman Giacomi's question, there is a monthly report that gets presented to the Board of Directors, which actually lists it's a very detailed, extensive report of the budget, and it also, I can recall having been there at meetings. It's got all the shows, expected attendance, and all those details. We do have liaisons from this board on the board, on the Palace board. It could just be as simple as just getting that same copy that liaison receives on a monthly basis and bringing it over, submitting it to the clerk's office as a receive and place on file, and we can get that report on a monthly basis.
Yeah, as you know, and you're right, there are aldermen, people who sit on our board. Sometimes we're a little anxious of saying it by month, because if we have 3 events coming on October 30th, 31st, November 1st, and we closed it out, then you go, well, what's happening here? So it almost looks better when we look at stuff, okay, we know this month and, you know, has X, and this is it's gonna hit our month then, but everything we have is open. And we share everything, so there's nothing that's closed here. There's no hidden cash I could find.
Anything further? One of the things, just before you go, and thank you so much for coming. I know we had a conversation at the executive board last week, because I happen to be one of those aldermen who does sit on that board. And we can make information available, although, as you say, it does need often to come with some sort of an explanation about what's happening, because it looks worse or better at different times when that's not a real snapshot of what's going on. But we had spoken at the executive board, and I've subsequently had a chance to have a conversation with the mayor. And I do think that this operating agreement was drafted in 2002 when this organization was getting off the ground. Nobody quite knew how it was going to go. It's now had 15 years of operations. I think it might be time for us to sit down collaboratively and look at what the expectations are, what the possibilities are, and what we really want to see going forward over the next few years, and potentially come with an operating agreement that's got built-in times to recalculate it. So to that end, we'll be putting together a committee made up of a couple of aldermen, some folks from the board there, hopefully, and the mayor has indicated that's folks that he would like to see on there as well, and try to look at what we can do to really bring this in. And I think that can tie in with the outreach to the community as well as to what kind of programming they're looking for. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we'll be having further conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
With that, the next item on our agenda would be to go to public speaking, and I thank you all for your patience. I know we have a lot of folks here tonight looking to address us. This took a little longer than I anticipated, but there were 2 issues we needed to get aired out here, and I'm happy we're able to do that. With that, we'll go right to the city sheriff. Anyone who wishes to address this board, please sign up with the city sheriff. Please state your name and address so we'll have it for our records when you begin to speak. And there's a 5-minute limit. I'll give you a 1-minute heads up. Mr. Sheriff, if you'd call the first speaker.
First speaker tonight from 100 Fulkerson Drive, Hamid from the Mass.
Good evening. My name is Imam Abdel Hamid Al-Gizawi. I am the Imam of United Muslim Mosque, 132 Prospect Street. By the way, I'm a Muslim and I came to share the moment, and thank you for allowing me this night. My son Omar, he was coloring on the wall, and I told him, Omar, stop, what are you doing? Omar didn't look at me, didn't pay attention. And Owen, as a father, said, are you ridiculous, Omar? I'm calling on you. So Omar gazed at me and started coloring more and more and more. 1 week later, I walked in and I found Omar coloring on the wall. I came to him as a father.
You need to stay at the microphone, otherwise the tape won't pick you up.
I come down and said, Omar, you are a big boy. Please, don't color the wall. Believe me, Omar, it changed. Because no one in the city wanted to be imitated or threatened or have fear inside. Everyone looking to live in peace. And some specific people, they are looking for inner peace. As Imam, I found there is a gap in the society between the government and the communities. That's why I came this night to share some thoughts in brief. God in the Quran, as I believe as a Muslim, said, "O mankind," and this is inclusive address from Almighty God, Allah, through a royal way. Allah addresses everyone in this humanity, regardless about the nationalities, regardless about the ethnicities, regardless about the colors or the faith, even the faith claim, because the faith claim, as I believe, will be settled at the sight of Allah in the day of resurrection. My favorite analogy, why we are like a bouquet of flower, a bunch of flower. So you can find the white flower is beautiful in its light, so is the yellow, is the pink, is the blue, and much more beautiful are all of them together. I came today to suggest, to bridge the gap between the government and the communities. We have here in America Islamophobia, people afraid of Islam. And also Muslims afraid to come down here to meet with the mayor and the government and the aldermen. That's why I came today to suggest to have a committee of interfaith. And it could be affiliated with the mayor office, like I saw that in New York. In New York, they have a committee, it's a religious committee. And the purpose of this committee is to make the people together. When we have 6 people from different 6 religions or different faith, and everyone is playing a vital role in the society to make the people together, this, we will not have fear at the end of the day. As Imam, I tell my community, we have to knock at the doors of our neighbor. Because if I take care of my neighbor and you take care of your neighbor and this take care of his neighbor, there is no fear in the community. I believe we came from the same family, from the same root, from Adam and Eve. God said in the Quran, "O mankind, we created you from male and female, from Adam and Eve. And we made you nations and tribes." Why? To get to know each other and recognize one another.
1 minute.
The most honorable of you at the sight of God is the most pious of you, regardless about the faith, regardless about the color, regardless about the culture, the customs, the tradition, the country, whatever. That's why I came today to share the moment and suggest, if we have this council of interfaith, we will make people come here and will not scare. And by the way, it will be the key to bridge the link between the communities and the government. Thank you so much.
Next speaker from 62 Avalon Circle, Richard Woods.
Well, that's a hard act to follow, but I want to say Richard Wood, Avalon Circle, Waterbury, and I see behind me here a lot of people from the special ed group. I just wanted to say thank you for the work you've done for us. I've met some of the children that have benefited from your skills and abilities, which are not always recognized. It's not unusual. A lot of good skilled things are not recognized by people who don't know how. But going back to what the imam was saying, we had an incident last Friday up at the mosque, and it showed the community coming together. The minute the information came out about some possible threats, the Orthodox Jewish community called and said, what can we do to help? Bob Goodrich from Race came down. And Captain Apicella from the police department came down also to supervise and to help us. That's the community coming together. And whether it would be a mosque or a church or whatever, we do work that way in Waterbury because, as you know, Waterbury is the center of the universe. Whether you realize it or not, we do things a little bit differently here, being diverse, multilingual. And talking about the Palace Theater, I'm going to be there on Saturday, but I'm going to check out the stage. They were talking about having some multicultural events there. I performed there before most of you were born, and I did flamenco dancing. And I remember on stage right, my heel got stuck in a hole, and I almost broke my leg, but that was a while back. But that's a simple fact that the Palace Theater has been a substantive balance point in Waterbury for many reasons. And something we could do with it is make it partially a training center for both the arts and musicians. It could be a school. We have the room, we have the space, and in Waterbury, we have lots of talent. You perform in Las Vegas, the minute you say you're from Waterbury, they say you're hired. Because Waterbury musicians were known for a long time as not just being good, but showing up on time. And in the music business, that's a critical factor. And that's my message of the evening. I wish you all well, and thank you very much for doing the job of alderman. You didn't realize how hard it was going to be when you signed on. I think you found out now it's almost a full-time job. Thank you very much. Peace be with you.
Next speaker from 96 Windsor Street, Robert Dorr.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mayor, members of the audience. My name is Robert Dorr. I live at 96 Windsor Street, Waterbury, Connecticut, and I am the Secretary-Treasurer of the Waterbury Veterans Memorial Committee. I come to you tonight to talk about the goodness that is the city of Waterbury and the braveness and the valor of those men and women who have served in the armed forces from the city of Waterbury. But I talk to you tonight about one in particular. His name is Father Thomas Michael Conway. He was born in Waterbury April 5th, 1908. He was baptized at the Immaculate Conception Parish, April 12th, 1908. He was lost at sea, August 2nd, 1945, an unsung hero of World War II. He was the chaplain on the USS Indianapolis. The USS Indianapolis was sunk 10 minutes past 12 on July 30th, 1945, just before the end of the war. He, Father Conway, went into the water with almost 900 other sailors. 300 were killed instantly, went down with the ship. Father Conway supervised the lives and the well-being of 400 men who were floating on a cargo net. During the next 3.5 days, he dispatched the souls of over 300 men. He gave his own life so that others could live. And on April 5th, 2018, the Very Reverend Christopher Ford and the members of the Waterbury Veterans Memorial Committee invite you and all members of the public to attend a Mass of Remembrance at the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception, 78 West Main Street, Waterbury. And we will remember the life and service of Father Thomas Michael Conway. It has been said by a wiser sage than I that a man dies twice. Once when his spirit leaves his body, and once when we stop speaking his name. So I ask you and the members of the Waterbury community to attend this Mass so that we can remember the service of our heroic priest from 224 Cook Street, Waterbury, Connecticut, Lieutenant Reverend Thomas Michael Conway. Thank you.
Next speaker from 33 Clifton Ave, Kieran Hines.
Good evening, everyone. Karen Hines, 33 Clifton Avenue. It is great to know that I live in a city where Fulton Park was designed by the gentleman who designed Central Park. It is great to know that I live in a city where the Palace Theater is one of the world's top 200. It is not great for me to live in a city where we have an ordinance that allows trash to continually litter our streets. It is not great that school children waiting for the bus must stand between overflowing trash and recycle bins that never gets picked up at the time it's supposed to. But most importantly, that we allow the trash bins to be there. What I'm asking the board to do is this. The current ordinance of 5022D, you allow 24 hours for trash to put out, 24 hours for it to be picked up. However, the bins, if someone violates that, they have 5 days in which to correct that. Let's think about this. 24 hours, I put my bin out. 24 hours, I don't feel like it. So you give me a warning, but I have 5 days to correct it. Oh, wait, the cycle starts all over again. I've seen this corrected in Boston. What I'm asking the aldermen to do is this. Let's stop the 5-day notice. 24 hours out, 24 hours in. And let's start fining a lot of these landlords who refuse to put the trash out at the proper time and take it back up. Why should our cities live, why should this city, why should our children stand among trash while they're waiting for the bus? Why is that a health hazard? I have pictures I can share with you of overflowing trash cans. Change the ordinance, because the ordinance now makes no sense. Here's what you could do with that extra revenue. The potholes on Sarsfield Road, the potholes on Cook and Grove, and the sidewalks on Clifton Ave and Cook Street can be fixed. Here's something else you can do with a cleaner city. We can start tourism right here in Waterbury, where they come to the Palace Theater, let them take pictures at Fulton Park, but they can't do that now because they have to drive up Cook Street full of trash. And we have the Cross, the city that has a cross, but it could be a tourist destination. Well, who wants to visit a dumpy, trashy, stinky city? It's a simple fix. It cleans up our city, it brings revenue in, it boosts our tourism. What are we waiting for? I ask you, as a member of the society here, I came from Boston, I've lived here for 16 years. I heard Waterbury is an up-and-coming city. Where is the up and where is the coming? It's just trash. Can we clean that up and let's stop talking about how we're going to make Waterbury beautiful and get it done? Revenue is on the table. Would you help me make this a proud place for me to live? I don't want to walk through trash, and I'm tired of going to Hartford and West Hartford. When I tell people that I live in Waterbury, they say, oh, you live there. I can't invite anybody to my house right now because they have to drive up Cook Street. Cook Street stinks, and it's not the only street. Drive around certain parts of Waterbury, and you will see what I'm talking about. Change the ordinance, bring in revenue, and all the absentee landlords that we have who come into Waterbury, take up homes here. They don't stick around to see when trash is being put out. All they have to do is have the tenants take $50 off of their rent and have someone responsible for dragging out the trash and bringing it back. Can we make exemptions? Possibly, because there are some houses that do not have a walkway. But this is an easy fix. Come on, I don't want to have to live in trash. Maybe your street is clean, but mine's not. And after 16 years of being here, I want to see the up and I want to see the come in. Boston did it. New York did it. What are we waiting for? Thank you.
Next speaker from 132 Kelsey Street, Cecilia Elena Fiat.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity that you guys give me to speak. I'm here to speak in behalf. Would you just state your
name and address? Okay.
132 Kelsey Street
And your
in
name?
Waterbury. Cecilia El Alfi.
Thank you.
I'm here to speak in behalf of the children of our program in the ABA and the Special Ed Department. I work for the City of Waterbury in the Special Ed Department for 22 years. As a behavioral therapist, I worked for 12 years with these children. A lot of those children, I know them since they were in kindergarten. They are in high school, they are succeeding, thanks to the effort, thanks to the daily work that we put into improve each of these children's life. Each one of these kids works with an individual developed plan according to their needs. I'm here to speak in behalf of them. The decision that you are gonna make to outsource our jobs is gonna directly affect them. I think that is cruel, it's inhuman, and I think will be devastating for them. There is a large group of children in this community that they are from the Latino community. So besides serving as a therapist daily, I have to serve as a translator to communicate closely with the parents of both schools, Wallace and Crosby School. I'm asking you guys to look deep down in your heart and find a place for them, a first place, not a place that is gonna save you guys money from the budget, a first place for them. Our children deserve the best. Thank you.
Next speaker from 207 Bucks Hill Road, Jessica Azaria.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Irizarry, 207 Bucks Hill Road, Waterbury, Connecticut. I'm a behavioral therapist for the city of Waterbury. I've been doing it. I've been working for the city for about 14 years in education. The past 10 years, I've been a behavioral therapist. Found out last week about changes in the budget, and the Board of Ed wants to outsource our jobs. I was kind of like in disbelief and shock when I first heard it. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, why would they do that to our kids? We work with the most vulnerable kids in the city of Waterbury. They don't have a voice. And it's not fair to make changes to these kids' lives. They already go through enough as it is. And cutting our positions and outsourcing them is going to be so detrimental to these kids, it's gonna take them forever to bounce back, to even move forward. Alafi told you how hard we work. Many of these kids, so you've seen since preschool, kindergarten, we watched them grow. And to see the progress that they've all made. That's all gonna be thrown out the window, bringing in new staff, different types of programming that they do differently than what we do. The city tried using an outsourced agency before, and it did not work. So why are we revisiting it? There's a reason why our job positions were created. It was to save the city money. So now we're being told that outsourcing is going to take money away from our program, from our city. It's wrong. Find another way to cut the money. Leave our kids alone. Please, please. I don't want to see any of these kids going downhill, failing, going downhill, regressing. What's going to end up happening, they're going to have more severe behaviors, which puts not only them at risk, but the kids that they're in school with. It puts all of them, everybody is at risk. I ask you again, please, to reconsider, relook at the budget. Do not attack our most vulnerable students in the city of Waterbury. Thank you.
Mr. Sheriff, just one second. I do want to just point out, because I know there's a lot of people who want to speak about it. You're all welcome to speak about this issue. I have a soft spot in my heart for the very issues that you're talking about. We're very involved with that at one point. But I do want to just make clear as you're here tonight that the budget is a proposed Board of Education budget. It hasn't come to us yet. And once we get it, we can only vote on a bottom line. The line items are solely within the purview of the Board of Education, and we don't control how that happens. We can have a conversation with them when they get here, but I just want you to understand it's not something we can somehow stop whatever's going to happen if we were to decide it's not a good idea. Having said that, I don't want to discourage anyone who wishes to address us this evening. Please come up and feel free to do that, but I don't want you to leave with the wrong impression that somehow we're the body that can undo what's going to happen on particular line items. Mr. Sheriff.
Next speaker from 11 Steuben Street, Lawrence V. DePillo.
Good evening. Lawrence DePillo, 11 Steuben Street. And I want to thank the mayor, Mr. Pagano, and Corp Counsel Linda Whibby for a very informative presentation this evening. There were a number of other issues that weren't addressed, however. It seems there was not just one spill. In 2017, we were aware of 3 spills. And what has to be asked is, who's in charge? We have a general manager making more than $111,000. We have a superintendent of waste makes more than $90,000. How is it possible that on a holiday, not one or the other is there? How many people were on call that day? And were they in the area? When you're on call, you're not supposed to be going outside the city or outside the state. You're supposed to be available to immediately respond if you're needed. What we've heard about is what may be the potential fixes. What we have not heard totally was what the root cause is of not one spill because of power cut, but 2 additional spills that haven't been answered. And I really think we need to get to the bottom of who's responsible for that plant and how this is going to be prevented in the future and why it wasn't prevented 2 additional spills in 2017. The other issue was number 10 on your proposal here for $40 million for a phosphorus reduction upgrade. When I was on the Board of Aldermen, I was on a Water and Sewer Subcommittee. This is prior to Synagros' contract being signed. And when Synagro was down, the city of Waterbury was capable of meeting all of the new phosphorus requirements. And at that time, I had suggested that the mayor do a couple of things. Because they were talking about $40 million, was to first of all see when Synagro was not in operation, what really makes up our waste? And is it marketable? Or more importantly, is it disposable without a tremendous cost to the city? Secondly, was to take that waste and get quotes to actually haul it away from Waterbury without having to run an incinerator. Because we're not the only city that generates waste, and other cities don't have incinerators, and they take care of their waste differently by hauling it off-site. $40 million is a lot of money. And I believe we probably, either through the first suggestion or the second, could dispose of our waste for far less than $40 million. But instead, the mayor went ahead and signed an agreement with Synagro. And maybe now, potentially, we're stuck with a $40 million phosphorus upgrade for Synagro, not for Waterbury. I want to remind you, when they were shut down, we met the numbers for phosphorus. The other question is, has anyone spoken to our U.S. senators, our congresspeople, to look and see whether or not the EPA is going to give Waterbury some additional time or possibly even changes in the regulations that we don't have to spend $40 million on a plant?
1 minute, Mr. DePillo.
I also want to remind you that there's a capital recovery charge in our sewer charge, one that was started in 1995 and was supposed to end in 2015. Here it is 2018, and we're still paying for a capital recovery charge, which was for the loan for the $190 million we borrowed for that plant. Who's going to pay for this $40 million? And how is it going to be paid for? Or is this just another never-ending tax, and the citizens of Waterbury once more have been fed a lie? And instead of that capital recovery charge disappearing after the 20 years, which was 2015, we're still paying it. And how many more years is somebody going to saddle this city with $40 million worth of additional debt? I think you really need to take a hard look at this and find out if it's absolutely necessary. I don't believe it is. Thank you.
Next speaker from 300 Shafts Drive, Barbara Bandolini.
Hi, I'm Barbara Bandolini from 300 Shafts Drive. I'm not a wordsmith. I'm here strictly to advocate for the children. I'm a little bit like ready to buckle after the news that you guys will not be looking at the line items of the budget. So we were like, somebody has to look at the line item statistically like we do on our jobs, okay? We represent ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. A standing for socially significant. Everything we do, make sure there's a socially significant outcome for the child. B, we take discrete trials, behavior measurements, help me guys, and we analyze it, okay? I have a book here, the new ABA Program Companion, which is the new wave. I don't know if you guys realize this. I don't know if my friends, my colleagues realize this, but we all operate under the state. We have to follow the 7 dimensions of applied behavioral analysis. We have to make sure everything's conceptually systematic. I don't think the Board of Education has done due diligence. We have to make sure that it's analytical. We have to make sure that we get in there and make sure it's effective, which means we have to get in there and modify. The teachers here tonight that I said you better back me up because they do most of this work. We have a BCBA, which is supposed to be really on site, has 3 other sites. She's really only doing, help me with the numbers, 14 hours maybe one week, 21 hours the next week. That's against federal regs. I know those federal regs inside and out, and I know what funds us, and I know it's from the Ideal grant funding. Some of our positions are funded through them, some of them not. That got wishy-washy the other night at the Board of Education. They haven't done due diligence as how bad this could be if you bring in, myself, I've been in the field for 40 years. I started when I was 15 years old. We're a learned audience for communication. Learned audience for communication. We have a lot of nonverbal students. You can't teach that in 40 hours. You can't teach sign language. Lauren over here is a pro on using PEC symbols and programming, iPads in a second's notice in successive approximations to die down a behavior. That can't be taught in 40 hours. To become me and Kara and most of my colleagues here, like when they say it's a win-win, I'm not up here. I'm right now in the BCBA program. I'm moving along, okay? I'm up here because it's not a win-win for the children. If one child de-escalates because they can't communicate, that's one child too much. If one parent has a lawyer and becomes lawyered up and pushes things to team process, like right now you guys are outsourcing to, private agency. I worked for private agency. I still have, here a reflex where just talking about it makes the hair on my arms, raise, because first of all, the turnover rate is 70%. Our kids can't handle that. Their programs are not implemented. The parents are all lawyered up, they push things to team process, and then what happens is those children are served out of state, okay?
1 minute, Mrs. Baglini.
1 minute?
1 minute.
Okay, so as you could imagine, Connecticut isn't gonna like this. The Advisory of Autistic Services, which is our guiding light from DCF and DDS, who have the Department of Public Health people on their work, on their team meetings, they're not gonna like this. I mean, this might be the Band-Aid for right now. Please don't do this to the children. Like I said, I'm not gonna be here in a year. Please don't do this to the children. Don't. And I know that you said you're not gonna be looking at the budget. Well, there's gotta be some oversight over that. I mean, is it that, I wanted to thank the mayor too. Where does this stop? I mean, Autism Speaks marches across the street every year. They're talking about not marching this year. That alone is going to raise waves, okay? Because we have to make a social movement. Thank you.
Next speaker from 65 Bank Street, Melissa Stark.
Melissa Stark, President of the Waterbury City Employees Association, located at 65 Bank Street, second floor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, and members of the board. As I said, my name is Melissa Stark. I represent the white-collar employees here in Waterbury, both general government and education. I know the proposal has not been put forth before you just yet, but I wanted the opportunity to speak to you the first time available. The proposed budget includes the elimination of 6 elementary attendance school counselors, 2 reading clerks, and 40 behavioral therapists, all of which are from the white-collar union. 51%, actually over 51%, of the proposed impacted employees live right here in Waterbury. They are voters, they are taxpayers. As employees and taxpayers and voters, don't they deserve transparency? I have been disappointed since finding out the news about the possible elimination of the behavioral therapists and the privatization of them. I've been disappointed in the lack of transparency in this process. Why has there not been an opportunity for the public, the employees, to participate in the solicitation of bidders or have a voice in the study of the proposals? Again, I ask where the transparency is. It's my understanding that an REP, has been put into place and is ready to be sent out to outside bidders and private companies. They're looking to seek registered behavioral technicians. I requested a copy of the RFP and I've yet to receive it. So I did some research on my own and I looked up what the qualifications or what exactly is a registered behavioral technician. Multiple websites that I visited identified a registered behavioral technician as a paraprofessional that has 40 hours of training, a minimum of a high school diploma, and also has to pass a capacity assessment test. All these behavioral therapists that have worked for the city of Waterbury for the minimum of 10, or at least 10, many of them, 10, 15 plus years, all of them have higher qualifications than the definitions of a registered behavioral technician. I understand, as you pointed out earlier, Mr. President, that you are not able to vote on an actual department elimination or anything like that. It's just basic, it's just the numbers. That's why I look forward to the opportunity to meet with the mayor, to meet with the superintendent and the Board of Education to try to come up with other ways that we can make cuts more across the board and not just a complete department that services the most vulnerable members of the community. And I think I said just about everything. So I appreciate your time. And forgive me, I just found out about this last week. There's been a lot to do in a very short period of time. I will be at the next Board of Aldermen meeting as well. And I look forward to meeting with the city and to work at ways that we can minimize the impact on the employees, still avoid the privatization altogether, and give quality services to these students. But also, I am completely aware of the importance of balancing the budget. So I am optimistic for the opportunity to work with the city on this. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker from 2929 East Main, Reverend Gray.
Good evening, Board of Aldermen, Mayor. My name is Ali Gray III. I reside at 2929 East Main Street. And I'm here tonight to speak on the proposed education budget, the ABA therapist workforce reduction, quote, layoff. What a sad day it is when our elected officials would put a price tag on the education of our most vulnerable students. I've lived in Waterbury for the past 31 years. I've worked for the city in public education for the last 8 years, 4 of those at the ABA program. I'm a proud homeowner, a hard worker, a taxpayer. And as an ABA therapist, I want to say this: we work hard. All ABA therapists, please stand. We love our students. That's why we work with them. And this is 40 families that a lot of us live here in Waterbury, pay taxes, jobs gone, income's gone. And I just want to say that scripture up there, if you guys look what it says, anybody know what that scripture says? It's Proverbs 3, verses 3 and 4. It says this: "Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, and so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man." It's such a shame that we would put our children and these families on the chopping block. There are many places that we could cut the fat in education, in the education budget. $250,000 is going to the Palace Theater from education. Autistic children should not be one of them. Thank you.
Next speaker for 41 Pilgrim Ave, Jimmy Griffin.
Mr. Mayor, President of the board members. Well, I grew up in this city. I came here when I was 9 months old from Columbia, South Carolina. Lived on Long Hill. Went away at the age of 19, came back when my mother passed in 1992. In 1993, I moved back to Waterbury. When I moved back, I saw a system of government that was in shambles, I thought. I like to say today, though, that I'm real happy when I look out over the Board of Aldermen to see that we have 5 minority aldermen on the Board of Aldermen, and that's the first time in the history of the city that you have that many Board Alderman members, and that's a direct result of aldermen by district. Second, I also noticed that the Human Rights Commission that was mandated by the federal government back in 1989 was there. And after we finally went through charter revision and passed the alderman by district, I looked and I said, wow, we got a Human Rights Commission that we had 5 mayors: Santa Petro, Bergen, Giordano, Chardura, and O'Leary. And in all those years, the mandate that was set by the federal government has not been adhered to. We have one of the highest unemployment or disparities among minorities in civil service out of any city in the state of Connecticut. We have a Human Rights Commission that was mandated to have a director and an assistant to process the complaints when they came in. To this day, we have not funded that commission. Today, all over the world, one of the biggest issues that's facing us is human rights. We see school shootings, we see a lot of stuff going on. And Waterbury, Connecticut has yet to has yet to fund the office that was established by law, by charter. As a matter of fact, you even gutted the commission. In 2004, you had another charter revision commission, and you gutted the Human Rights Commission. Today, we have a black police chief. We had one black superintendent of schools. And there's no women that ever held a department head except for the medical, I think it was the medical department at one time we had a woman there. We've got a superintendent of school job open right now. Torrington just hired a black woman. Watertown just hired a black man. And Waterbury, Connecticut has yet to hire a black woman in a department head position. And I think it's high time that we get it. I think that you should reinstitute and put some teeth into the Civil Rights and Human Rights Commission in the city of Waterbury.
1 minute, Mr. Griffin.
Because you are out of compliance, you've been out of compliance, and it's the law, it's the charter. It's in the charter. I got two different charter revisions that were done. And in both of them, you haven't adhered to any of those things in the charter. I think it's high time that you do that. Thank you.
Next speaker is Mayor Neil O'Leary.
Thank you. I have another commitment tonight, so I didn't want to leave without talking about this ABA issue and maybe giving you some sign of relief, maybe. I don't know. So, I don't know if all the aldermen know, but the applied behavioral analyst position here in the city of Waterbury, they work very, very diligently with our special population. I don't think the quality of their work has ever been questioned. I do know that it's been expressed to me from members of the Board of Education and Special Ed that it's a difficult position to fill. There was an idea from some folks in central office and the Board of Ed that there should be opportunities explored because they weren't sure, quite frankly, that we were meeting the needs of the students in the district. I think most of these great people here might be able to agree with that. It's a position that is very difficult to fill. Someone had an idea to explore other opportunities. And, you know, just put yourself, you all can realize this. And, Mr. President, I do appreciate you telling these great people that it is not a Board of Aldermen position to fill. It's a Board of Education position. The responsibility lies with the Board of Ed. In all fairness to the Board of Ed, they are trying to do the best they can, given the circumstances of the state of Connecticut, as you all know. In all fairness to the board, I think that every single member of that Board of Education, every single member of this Board of Aldermen, including myself, are very partial to the special ed population in the city of Waterbury. My son is an ABA and a BCBA. I know a lot about this subject. I don't ever remember anyone, certainly not in my office, saying that we were going to privatize these positions. I can tell you what we have said is that we need to figure out how to supply more resources to the special ed department. I can tell you that that's been a concern of mine for the last 6 years, and quite frankly, it's a son of a gun because every year the state of Connecticut cuts the budget, and every year we're trying to figure out how to serve the needs of these kids, and I know that you all are very partial to that as well. So I don't want you to leave here tonight thinking that these positions are going to be privatized, because quite frankly, I don't see that in the future. What I do see, and I'm really glad you're all here, it's a very good thing you're all here, is that you've made these folks very much aware of what you do. And I don't know, because I was away in Washington last week, but I don't know if you had the opportunity to address the Board of Education on this matter. So hopefully you made them aware of what you do. So I jumped in front of the last two speakers, and I do apologize for that. But I wanted you to leave here tonight knowing that at the end of the day, what is going to be in the plan of the Board of Education, the Office of the Superintendent, the Office of the Mayor, and ultimately the Board of Aldermen is to do what's right for the special kids in the city of Waterbury. That's what we're going to do. So we will explore other opportunities. We will try to figure out how to provide more resources to special education. And we have been lobbying for the last couple of years, very unsuccessfully, as you probably know, to get more compensation for our special population. This is just a terrible time to be doing it because the state of Connecticut is in a crisis of its own, and I'm sure you're all aware of that, especially working in education. But you can be rest assured that when you leave here tonight, that the focus is going to be on what's the best thing for the children, the special kids of Waterbury. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next speaker from 130 Beth Lane, Richard Etik.
Good evening. Richard Etik, 130 Beth Lane. And I have my own little timer here. I've never been in this kind of meeting, and I know I better use this thing because if I don't, I'm not going to get it all out. With regards to what Mr. Mayor just said, unfortunately, there was a meeting last Thursday night, and it was publicized in the news that that is what they were going to do. The plan was to outsource. So let me just get on my spiel, and hopefully I can do this. I'm here to address concerns over the school board's decision to possibly outsource therapist positions in our school system, specifically the therapists who work with our autistic community. But before I address my concerns, I would like to repeat some things that were stated here, I think at the last meeting. I've never been here, so I took advantage of my resources and I got online and watched a little bit of a video to just get a little warm up to the area. And Mr. Thomas Van Stone, member of the Board of Education, addressed this body over budgetary concerns concerning the salary range of the inbound superintendent of schools whenever that takes place. And very candidly admitted that as Board of Education members, they have been quite open to, and I quote, throw money around, end quote, and that not all members have been in agreement with such an approach to financial management. Mr. Van Stone also was candid to admit that financial decisions have been made at great cost to the budget, which a little homework on my end, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the pie chart on the Waterbury website, helped reveal to me that the Department of Education receives the largest portion of city budget appropriations, totaling somewhere in the vicinity of just under $229 million. Effectively, 56% of the city's budget allocations go to education in this city. I don't know if everybody sitting here knows that. And then I've also read that there was $2.75 million increase in 2017. The State Alliance grant, which somebody just mentioned about, a portion of $20 million, I read in that report, is sent directly to the Board of Education. So it goes straight to them, doesn't even go through here, I guess. What concerns me is that Mr. Van Stone also indicated that the use of grants has not been the best either. And just a special note, the state mandates a portion of that grant to be used for reform purposes meant for creation of new programs at the local level. So now that brought a question inside of me after reading that, what programs are being made in the city of Waterbury? And at what cost and what percentage of that grant is that money being used? I don't know. Do we know? A lot of his statements shook me at my core because of what I wanted to come speak about myself tonight. In a nutshell, last week there were a couple meetings. There were last-minute meetings, I guess. One was on a Wednesday night, and then Thursday night was a Board of Education meeting. Thursday night, which it was revealed that there was a plan to outsource the therapist positions, somewhere in the range of saving $500,000. That plan got blasted by everybody who was there, according to an NBC report, and I agree. We too, my wife and I have an autistic child enrolled at Crosby. Our private behavioral pediatrician from UConn Health System was amazed at the great goals set by the team in place. But it's not the upper team we're concerned about. It's the foot soldiers, if I can use that term, who carry the mission. There are many therapists which have been, 20 years. Outsourcing of foot soldiers, if you will, to work with autistic children? Really? That is the most, as you've heard this word tonight, the most vulnerable population. In case anyone doesn't know, you don't introduce as a cultural change, that type of cultural change, when outsourced folks might be changing faces from time to time because the hiring firm decides to pull someone and move them to another location. These children need stability. Many of them have been in the system since birth to 3, and they'll remain there until they're 21 years old.
1 minute, Mr. Atik.
I'm sorry?
1 minute.
They need stability. I understand that the RFP will require the existing employees to be given the first opportunity to apply for their positions. Can we guarantee that that pay scale is going to be the same? I don't think so. I mean, if we're going to cut, there's a reason. We're going to cut budget. So it means the pay is going to be less. So the question is, will they be able to afford the cuts? What happens to them? Then they have to start looking for other opportunities, and our vulnerable autistic community still loses. They lose familiarity, which they desperately need. They lose stability because I can't see the outsourcing is going to be the answer. The last thing I want to end with is real quick from Robert Henry, the deputy superintendent, gave a letter in October 2017, and he listed 3 initial goals that they have established. And the first was ensuring stability, continuity, and a path toward progress in all aspects of the district's programs and operations through focused leadership. 2 key words: stability and continuity. And that's what an autistic community needs. Thank you.
Next speaker from 45 Pierce Street, Sharon L. Samaska.
Good evening, Sharon Samaska from 45 Pierce Street. I'm coming before you tonight because I'm concerned about some things that are happening on the south end of town. I've spoken or tried to get information. I'm not getting it. I've lived at Pear Street for 30 years. I've watched the situation at the sewage treatment plant for 30 years. Over those 30 years, how many times have we heard a regulation came down from EPA or DEEP, something went wrong at the plant, there's a spill, and I would venture to tell each one of you that the spills that you know about are the top of the iceberg, because it's probably how they categorize a spill if it's considered a spill. We also don't know what they're doing to treat the effluent that does go into the river and how it affects the river. Now, I applaud the mayor for saying, let's clean up the south end. I'm all for it, but I'm still waiting for it. I'm greatly concerned because we don't have proper informational vehicles. I heard the explosion that happened that day at my house. I had no clue what it was. I had a dog hiding practically under the bed. No one came to my house. No one told me what was going on. I only found out later. We had the same situation at the fire at the Bristol Company. The fire burned for 21 days. It was not told to us what was wrong. No one came to us and said, do this, this, and this for your safety. I had one fireman on Sunday when the fire rekindled tell me, you need to get out of here for a little while and get some fresh air. Where's the city? Nova Dye was treated far differently than the Bristol Babcock Company was. Why was Bristol different? Why did it take DEEP 5 days to respond to our calls? Why did I have to pay almost $1,000 to have the char tested in my yard to prove to me that pollution is there? To prove to me that what fell from the sky is dangerous? We already know that the cancer rate in our side of town is higher. I had one tree die of cancer in my yard. Every one of my pets except one has died of cancer. The Bristol Company sits there in a toxic heap. We are waiting to see what will happen next. Do I think that the $200,000 grant for the study is going to help us? I don't know. Depends on who you hire. You need a PhD candidate. You do not want someone who's got only a bachelor's degree. You want someone reviewing that site who's going to give you the hard, cold facts, the truth. Because I live 200 feet away from it. I smell it. I caution kids not to climb the fences. I cautioned them again on Sunday when there were 3 of them there. The site is dangerous. It's unstable. It is a toxic, awful-looking spot. It's easily accessible. So here we go. I'm concerned about this. We're taxpayers. We elect you and our city officials to do the job, to protect us, to look out for us, to give us information, to make sure there's equality. You cannot compare the South End to Bunker Hill. Is it fair that I have to face what I'm facing and be told, oops, the river isn't pristine, it's never going to be?
1 minute, Ms. Mosley.
It's a dangerous river. You're stocking it with fish, but I ask you one question. When you stock it with fish, are they going to live? Is it safe for kids to be walking in there? Because I don't think it is. How are we going to get around this? You know, how can you, as the city, put us back on track? Why isn't the Environmental Control Commission being advised of everything? Why aren't you? It took a phone call from me last week to say, look at what's happening at FNG. I don't understand it. The Zoning Commission ruled that it was not in compliance with regulations and their expansion could not happen. They have resurrected the 2016 permit. Why? If it wasn't proper last year, how is it proper this year? And if it's a legal issue, how can they be bringing this to you without the legal issue being completed? Stall them. Do an appeal. How can a judge say the city's position is weak? Regulations are there for all of us.
That's time, Ms. Mosca.
I'll be back next.
Mr. President, last speaker tonight is Thomas Pelletier, 112 Concord Street.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President. Thomas Pelletier, 112 Concord Street. First, I'd like to bring up item number 9 on your agenda, safety valve contract. I would ask that you would pass this unanimously. It is a vital service that's saving the taxpayers of this city thousands and thousands of dollars on the water lines and the sewer lines from the street to their houses. I could tell you that I just had my whole sewer line replaced for a one-time payment of $121 for a whole year. I saved my household over $4,500 on having somebody come and repair that for $69.99, a one-time payment for the water line. They've told me that the water line for replacement could cost somewhere between $35,000 and $6,000. So I would hope that you guys pass this tonight for the taxpayers of the city. I also would like to commend Linda Wibby, Chuck Pagano, Mr. Cuevas, and the detective from the Waterbury Police Department tonight. I know that they said this is a preliminary report, what they've found so far, some of what they've done to solve some of the issues that have been going on down there. Quite frankly, they didn't say it was a final report. They said that they would be back as things develop. I would commend them for coming here tonight because we've heard over and over again, where's the report, where's the report? People want a thorough report, they want a real report, and that's what these 4 individuals tonight have done so far, and that's what they've committed to be doing so far. Secondly, about the $40 million for the phosphorus upgrade, you know, obviously the city doesn't want to have to spend $40 million, but, you know, quite frankly, these are mandates set by the federal government and the state of Connecticut. We have no choice but to upgrade that plant on the phosphorus. If we don't do it, we're facing fines and everything else. And I don't think in a time that we're trying to update this plant and trying to solve some of the one of the things tonight Mr. Pagano brought up was the, I believe he said it was the generator. They don't even make those anymore. Quite frankly, we've been talking about upgrading this plant for years. Some individuals that came up here tonight were on the board that you guys sit here before and said we can't spend that kind of money. I think that that's part of the reason why we're in the problems that we have with that plant at this time. But, you know, the city has been as transparent at the findings that they've been finding on this plant. The mayor brought all these people here. I know we hear all the time, people like to go to the radio and everything else, that the city is hiding something, this mayor is hiding something. He brought all these people here tonight to answer any questions that this board had and what the public has been asking you to ask. So I would hope that in the future people aren't going to go on the radio and say, well, you know, we didn't get these questions asked. You know, it's already decided in the long run. You had the time to ask all these questions that you had on this subject.
1 minute, Mr. Pelletier.
And lastly, I would just like to say to this board, I know that we're coming upon Easter. I want to wish everybody a happy Easter. Thank you for your service. I know that after the holiday, as the mayor has pointed out, we'll have the State of the City address, and we're going to have to make some serious decisions as to what the budget for the upcoming year is going to be, and hopefully by then the state of Connecticut will be a little bit stable where we can make some of these decisions. So I want to applaud you and thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, the next item of business would be the approval of minutes for the meeting of Monday, March 5th, 2018. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting for March 5th, 2018.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any changes? Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Although I wish I had been here, I'm listed on the presence and the absence on the same list.
Because you're always coming and going, Alderman.
Right.
We got to get you in both ways.
And I also seem to have been here because I actually seconded the adjournment. So that has
So we'll make the correction that Alderman Lopez was
Thank
not
you.
here, and he did not second the adjournment. So
Thank you.
I believe probably Alderman Napoli seconded the adjournment, so the record will be changed. With that change, is there anything else for the minutes? With that, then an aye would be to approve it as changed. A no would be to disapprove it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries. With respect to the items on your desk, we do have up front, if you did not get one, with respect to new business item number 8, the discs. I think some people got them and some did not. So if you need a disc with all of the information, it's the suspension of delinquent account balances. You can get that this evening. And with respect to item number 2, you should have a document which is the relevant resolution on your desks this evening. With that, we'll recess into committees. We'll begin with finance, and then we'll go to intergovernmental. Both will be out here this evening. Thank you.
Okay, I call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Could we have order in the chambers, please?
I can't get them to work right, Steve. I see it. Yeah, but those aren't on yet.
Okay, I call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve the following refunds to wit: Richard Yars, 63 River Street, $575.99. Bran Inc., Bron Inc., 24 Polk Ave, $1,114.37. Lisa McCarthy, 1012 Plymouth Avenue, $4,655.29. Total, $6,345.65.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The others went off.
Agenda item number 6, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve, subject to the Board of Education's approval at their regular meeting, March 15, 2018, of a maintenance agreement in the not-to-exceed amount of $170,403 with Tran US Inc. for a 3-year period to provide maintenance for district chillers as submitted by Carrie A. Swain, Clerk, Waterbury Board of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve the suspension of delinquent account balances fiscal year 2017-2018 as submitted by Frank A. Caruso, Jr.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
What's going on?
Item number 10, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve a bond authorization in the amount of $40 million for Waterbury Public Phosphorus Reduction Upgrade Project at the Water Pollution Control Plant as submitted by Michael LeBlanc, Director of Finance.
Make a motion that we set a public hearing for the April 9th meeting, 6:55 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to set a public hearing April 9th, 2018, 6:55 p.m. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Standing Committee. Your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve and authorize the Director of Finance to make refunds to taxpayers representing overpayments of tax bills in the amount of $33,200.79 submitted by Frank A. Caruso, Jr., Revenue Collection Manager.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Come on, intergovernmental committee. Close the door when they
Okay, I'd like to call to order the intergovernmental meeting scheduled for March 19th, 2018. If I may get your attention to item number 2. Your intergovernmental committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approves the city infrastructure associated with the reconstruction of the Warner Gardens housing development as submitted by James A. Sequin. Alderman Appley.
Motion to approve item 2.
Second.
I have a motion to approve item 2, which has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is item number 4. Your intergovernmental committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approves the declaration of restrictive use, covenant, and negative pledge agreement for 2100 South Main Street, also known as Risdon, with a DECD grant in the amount of $1 million as submitted by Dawn E. DeSantis, Staff Attorney, Office of Corporation Counsel. Alderman Napoli.
Motion to approve item 4.
Second.
I have a motion to approve item 4, which has been seconded. Any discussion? Alderman Cotto.
Could you explain in a little bit more detail the first and the second phase of the project?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to explain a little bit what we're trying to do. So we requested $1 million. We requested $2 million from the ECD. They have approved $1 million. And
I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Sure, Victor. My name is Santiago Bolanos. I'm with WDC,
Thank
Civil and Environmental Engineer. So in the first phase, we're going to address the cleanup of the surface of the site. So we're going to demo the existing walls, the smokestack, and we're going to clean up the site. The second phase will be performed at a later date, and what we're going to do is, at that point, do additional evaluation of the soils to later do remediation of soils. So the first phase is mostly above surface cleanup. Is that clear?
Yes.
Any other?
And what is the timing?
Sure. We're hoping to begin the cleanup by the end of June, early July. We are currently working with Fuss & O'Neill. They're lead environmental professionals to prepare a bid-ready document that we can publicly bid for the cleanup work. Okay? Any other questions? Good.
Further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of item 4?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Next item is item number 5. Your intergovernmental committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approves the resolution proclaiming April 2018 as Fair Housing Month in the City of Waterbury, as submitted by Michael Gilmore, Reinvestment Manager, Waterbury Development Corporation. Alderman Napoli.
Motion to approve the resolution proclaiming April 2018 as Fair Housing Month in the City of Waterbury.
Second.
I have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. Next item, item number 7. Your intergovernmental committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approves a resolution to authorize the mayor to execute and submit a revised supplemental application for state funding for the Cherry Street over Great Brook Bridge number 151030 project as submitted by Paul M. Belagama, City Engineer, Bureau of Engineering. Alderman Napoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Motion to approve item 7.
Second.
I have a motion to approve which has been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. Next item, item number 9. Your intergovernmental committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approves of the Sewer Line Protection Plan Program Agreement between the City of Waterbury and Homeowner Safety Valve Company, HSV, as submitted by Dennis Cuevas, General Manager, WPC. Alderman Napoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Motion to approve item 9.
Second the motion to approve item number 9.
I have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? Alderman Napoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cuevas, thank you very much for being here.
Sure.
One quick question. If there's ever an issue where there's a main break and to fix or repair the main costs over that threshold, the $6,500 threshold, does that ever happen, or is it normally under that $6,500 threshold?
It's normally a lateral, not the main. And normally the size of that lateral is normally somewhere around 6 inches.
Yep.
So I have not heard of an occasion where that has gone over the $6,500.
Okay. If it did, what would happen? Would the taxpayer have to pay for that, or?
Normally there is a stipulation in the agreement that they would pay up to $6,500, but it would have to be a very unique circumstance for it to go over that amount.
And how many of these actually break a year? What's the average?
I actually have a report that since the program started, there's been there's been 233 claims, and the company has paid out $160, and it usually averages between $500 and $24. Most of the times is that the company goes out there and cleans the line. That usually is mainly
the issue.
Most of the issues.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Any further discussion?
Yeah,
Alderman Matthews.
All right. What is the turnaround time when you do have someone that says that their line is clogged or there's a rupture within the line?
Normally, that it's within a day. They usually respond to that call within a day. If they normally call our department, we usually respond within an hour.
Okay. And what's the guarantee on the work once it's done, the new stuff?
The company usually warranties that for normally it's a year warranty as other warranties are. But if they are in that same program and they have an issue, they will come back because it's the value and what they actually cover is per incident.
Okay. All right.
So someone could have 3 or 4 incidents 1 year and they're covered.
Okay.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned.
That's it. Where's my president? Hey, Mike.
Hi, Ernie.
You see my brother's name on the...
Yeah, he's on there, yeah. That means you got to sell a lot of tables. You got to leave zoning, yeah. Well, you have such good attendance, you can leave early.
And then next meeting, we got the dual meeting for me here and over there.
It's not easy being you.
Okay, with that, we'll return to the regular order of business, and the following items are on the consent calendar. Item number 1 is on consent to approve city infrastructure associated with the reconstruction of the Warner Gardens housing development to include the following: sanitary sewer line, all water mains, fire hydrants, and blow-off assemblies, an expanded easement. Item 3 is on consent to approve refunds to Richard Yarouche of 63 River Street in the amount of $575.99. Braun Inc. at 24 Polk Avenue in the amount of $1,114.37. Lisa McCarthy of 1012 Plymouth Avenue in the amount of $4,655.29 with respect to the Bureau of Water and Water Pollution Control. Item 4 is on consent to approve a declaration of restricted covenant use and negative pledge agreement, 2100 South Main Street, Risden, DECD grant in the amount of $1 million. Item 5 is on consent to approve the resolution proclaiming April 2018 as Fair Housing Month in the city of Waterbury. Sorry. Item 6 is on consent to approve a maintenance agreement in the not-to-exceed amount of $107,403 with Train USA Incorporated for a 3-year period to provide maintenance for district chillers. Item 7 is on consent to approve a resolution to authorize the mayor to execute and submit a revised supplemental application for state funding for the Cherry Street over Great Brook Bridge. Item 8 is on consent to approve the suspension of delinquent account balances for the fiscal year 2017 to 2018. Item 9 is on consent to approve a sewer line protection plan program agreement between the City of Waterbury and the Homeowner Safety Valve Company. Item 10 is on consent to set a public hearing for April 9th at 6:55 p.m. with respect to a request for a bond authorization in the amount of $40 million for the public WPC phosphorus reduction upgrade project at the Water Pollution Control Plant. Items number 11 and number 1 are received and placed on file. Is there a motion with respect to the consent calendar?
Mr. President, item number 11, I think it's got some important issues. I'd like to keep it on the consent file as RPF. And otherwise, motion to approve consent calendar.
11 is received and placed on file, so it's going to stay as an RPF. We'll have the committee that will form and we'll get some reports back, but that's just going to go as an RPF.
Okay.
So the motion to approve made by Brunelli.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Napoli. Any changes to the consent calendar? Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could you repeat item 10, what you just stated on item 10?
Public hearing, April 9th, 6:55 p.m.
Thank you.
Any other changes to the consent calendar? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries. The consent calendar is approved. I think that's it. Any other business for the good of the organization?
Standing.
Oh, standing committees, I'm sorry. Standing committees. The chair would recognize Alderman Hadley.
Mr. President, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve and authorize the Director of Finance to make refunds to taxpayers representing overpayments of tax bills in the amount of $33,200.79 submitted by Frank A. Caruso, Revenue Collection Manager.
So moved.
Made by Alderman Di Giovancarlo, seconded by Alderman Martinez McCarthy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries. Anything further?
I got you.
Alderman Di Giovancarlo.
Just want to congratulate the Sacred Heart boys basketball team on an incredible 5-year run. Came to an end.
Go Hearts.
Came to an end last night, unfortunately. Lost in the state finals, but it was a historic run. So all those gentlemen should be congratulated.
Thank you. All right. Anything further? Alderman Brunelli?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion having been made and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.